A walk-in in this new age concept of a person whose original soul has departed his or her body and has been replaced with a new soul, either temporarily or permanently. For the most part, walk-ins are higher frequency aspects of someone's soul, here to heal and help during this time of transition. Once they allegedly enter a person, often after a traumatic experience, serious illness, or near-death experience, or, as some refer to it, new-death experience, the person's grid consciousness is forever changed, always going from negative to positive, and this may occur during a time of deep emotional trauma, while unconscious, or under anesthesia, or while asleep. A walk-in can be a soul exchange in which a new soul takes up residence in the body of a soul that walks out, one who has completed a mission on Earth. At times, the soul is ready to leave due to unbearable life circumstances. The walk-in soul agrees to complete the soul agreement left by the walk-out soul. Rather than having a body die in order to release the soul from its incarnation, another soul steps in and picks up where the previous soul left off. The walk-in soul or walk-out soul event, in which two souls completely swap places, is referred to as a soul exchange. This is always done with permission between the two souls and is typically a pre-incarnation agreement or a spiritual partnership between souls who are helping one another evolve. A walk-in can also be a companion soul in spirit. From walking along with an embodied soul, a walk-in can be a fragmented aspect of a soul coming home and reuniting with the soul essence in a body. Some walk-ins are a blend of soul essence and consciousness, inhabits one body simultaneously. These may rotate in and out of the driver's seat as needed to accomplish a task. Soul exchanges and walk-ins are apparently not uncommon. They are becoming more frequent as shift in human consciousness is occurring across the globe. Walk-ins are here to help humanity expand consciousness and become aware of the multi-dimensional aspects of the soul. In truth, we are walk-ins in one sense or another. Souls walk into the body of an infant, others walk into the body of a teen or adult. If you stop to think about it, it is really not at all that strange that some souls incarnate without spending time learning lessons brought about through infancy and childhood. To that, add that there are reports of children having soul exchanges. This is usually due to some trauma that the child cannot bear. Some part of the soul fragments. A higher aspect of that soul group will come in to animate the body and relieve the weary soul who needs some TLC in the higher dimensions. A walk-in spirit may stay temporarily or long-term. Psychics have reported that there was a surge of soul exchange in the 1980s and 90s. Those who had their first walk-in during that time may have had a huge adjustment to make being in the body. The natal soul may have left physical or emotional messes for the walk-in soul to sort through and repair. In addition to wading through all that, the body had to deal with the influx of higher vibration, energy that walk-in soul emanates. It is believed that recent changes in the template for the divine human have been downloaded into the DNA and physical form. Join us live Friday. Hey everybody, welcome to Andromeda 7, your celestial gateway and your channel for community support, help, friendship, love, knowledge, and being of value to others. Welcome back. If you're new to the channel, it's so good to have you with us. And you know it's Friday night and it's time to feed your mind and grow your heart. And tonight's show is Mysteries of Soul Exchange and Walk-ins. And this is kind of an intriguing subject because it's not something that is really mainstream. It's still kind of out there and new to people. So it is fascinating, no doubt about it. Hey, real quick, I just want to acknowledge chat. Scotty Boy, good to see you. Sweet Mary Wins, it's good to have you with us. Chloe, so glad you had a nice long nap and you're ready for a show. Let's see, Beloved Abstract, always good to see you, sir. Very good to have you with us. And let's see, I think, oh, Grumpy Stack, good to see you, brother. Hope you're staying cool. Know you had a birthday. Glad you enjoyed it with your family. Let's see, who else do we have? I think that's kind of it for now. Everybody does seem to trickle in a bit, but hey, it's good to be with you all. I want to welcome Jim Pascala. Very good to have you with us coming back with Grandpa Brian, and it looks like you guys are together, so that's awesome. Dalibor, always a pleasure having you on. Sophia, it's been a while. We're so happy to see you and glad you could join us tonight.
Thank you.
And Teresa has a nice little introduction she's going to go over with y'all, and we'll get this party started, so to speak. So on to you, my sweet sister.
The party started, and if Barry I don't know if Barry's in there or not, but he just celebrated a birthday day before yesterday.
Yeah, just popped in too. Yes, Barry Chad, hope you had a wonderful birthday.
Hi, Lucky. Good to see you. Okay, so there are many, many types of soul agreements and promises made between a soul family or other souls to experience life in our physical forms and to clear karma and expand our consciousness. That trailer video was really good, giving you an overview of it. And this recycling and rebirth involves initiations typically using agreements, as Lori explained. But typically it's often perceived as only from childbirth that you come in to your existing life as a child and you're born through the birth womb. But there are other types of promises, seldom discussed because they're so rare, but revealed more now in our current state of collective evolution or consciousness. So sometimes they're called soul exchanges, where you actually exchange a soul from one person to another, or you, and that's called soul swapping, or also walk-ins. And those walk-ins, I was always taught from a paranormal perspective, because that's how I came into all of this. I never thought of it as a promise or an agreement for a beneficial purpose between two souls prior to reincarnating, or between souls that only want to be here for a limited period of time. I always thought of it in the paranormal tradition of a possession. And of course, I came from a very staunch religious background with all kinds of fanatical religious practices, so it was always about demonic possession of souls. That's what a walk-in was called. And that's actually one of the least most common type of walk-ins. Quite rare, yet most often hyped up. It's the most hyped up, sensationalized experience because it sells tickets for Hollywood, entertainment, sci-fi TV shows, chills and thrills, right? Even YouTube channels. And it was more frequent, though, in previous epochs due to the state of human consciousness in those time periods, and particularly during biblical times, because you'll see a lot of scripture dealing with soul possession. But pop culture just loves their hot butter and popcorn with very cool paranormal tales. People like to be thrilled. Unfortunately, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but I come from this background so I understand it and I know it firsthand. So do evangelicals and other religious fanatics. Because now, even though they're well-intentioned and they want to help people, they're all over people about every little thing that goes wrong in their lives, especially something major physically. Some may be kinds of emotional disorders or mental health conditions. There's neurological, physiological ailments. And they've been targeted by these more fanatical people as attacks from the evil one on your soul. often misidentified as possession, resulting in treatments that are harmful to your body, harmful to your psychology, harmful to your soul. And there are many post-traumatic effects. And they can not only impact the experiencer physically and emotionally, but can also have an impact on their family life, their careers, their personal reputations, and relationships. I've seen well-intended groups of people who aren't trained targeting people as being possessed and doing things to them and trying to help fix them, leaving them without jobs, split marriages, children that won't even talk to them, and the list just goes on and on. I've been through it many, many times, and I've seen it, and I've been part of it. Possessions are real, and they do take place, but it takes a team of both spiritual and psychological professionals who are collectively extremely trained, highly qualified, spiritually strong, and knowledgeable to help make that determination. Not just a group of well-minded and well-intended people who have some psychic abilities and experiences. Okay? It's simply not the case, and it's unfortunate. And this is particularly important with regards to possible dissociative behaviors, schizophrenia, perceived multiple personalities, and even seizures. So a thorough understanding of the various types of soul promises, as well as training and diagnosing and treating psychological, emotional, and medical challenges of these experiencers would be of utmost value. So hopefully tonight, not that we're trying to turn you into a team of healers for this purpose, but we want to help increase the understanding about these walk-ins and soul-swapping promises, behaviors, and outcomes, because they're very beneficial to our expansion and growth and our lessons that we're learning. So this is definitely not about our traditional discussions that we've had about past lives. It's a lot deeper than that. And our guest, Reverend Jim Pascala, welcome back. Most of you know Jim. He's an extremely experienced healer and psychic medium with hands-on field experiences involving past life regressions, I believe Akashic record retrievals, paranormal activity, including crossing over spirits. So we're looking forward to his insight this evening, and perhaps he'll be able to share some of his experiences and stories with us, or at the very least, give us some insight. Does that sound good to you all, Lori?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to clarify. So
yeah.
The soul exchange or the walk-in comes from, let's say you were born, you have a life, you're 11, 12 years old, you have maybe an experience of a near death or something traumatic, and your soul goes, okay, I've had enough, I'm done here, this is too much for me. And someone else, some other soul comes in and says, look, I'll take over for you. Don't worry about it. We'll clear this up. Is that about right?
So, that, and I've also heard that it's a pre-incarnation agreement in some cases where the soul that's coming in is here to learn a specific set of lessons over a specific period of time, but has other things that it wants to accomplish in other dimensions. And so there's a prearranged agreement that at age whatever, and when I'm done with the lessons that I want to learn during this short period of time and move on, you'll come in and take over where I've left off. And
got it.
That imprint, the imprint of all their memories and everything they experienced up until that time gets transferred over to the new soul who's coming in. The one that you described previous to that is when there's traumatic events and the soul isn't mature enough to handle it, wants to break its agreement, wants to start over or have different kinds of lessons, can't handle it. And so an experienced soul who has already been through a lot of what this soul is going through knows how to handle it, comes in and assumes that life of that soul essence, and again, gets a memory transfer, and it's added to their Akashic record with we were talking about last week. So it just gets added to their soul experience, which explains, and a lot of the walk-ins also explain overlapping in linear time, where you have where you're incarnated into two different individuals, and the time periods kind of overlapped because you may have left one soul experience to experience the other.
So I'm curious, Jim, have you ever experienced anything like this in your many, many years of doing this type of work?
I can't say directly. I notice there's some people that would say their personalities are kind of bizarre because they can sometimes still hang on to some of the previous energy from the original incarnated individual, because everybody has personalities. We all know that, okay? And your personality is still retained within the spirit or soul of the individual. Now, the basic stuff is already there. I call it the simple part of yourself of being a spiritual enlightened being. And the fact that you're going to give up your body to some other person or spiritual being is like, what kind of partnership did you make? And it could stem from an agreement, like you said before, you were actually born to say, I know that I can handle this part of it, and I want somebody else to take over. And usually the person that steps in is, of course, been around the block many times or on the planet quite a few journeys. Because to take over a human body that is in an adult size, because think of the first 5 years of your life, you are learning how to be human, how to walk. So think of it, immediately you've got to know how to walk and talk like a human and act like one. Immediately taking over that body. So that's kind of like Shakaruni City, because most people, as I mentioned, have had to take the time how to be human, function as a human being. Now, to throw another little bit of a curve at you, my experience mostly has actually been with some ETs. ETs sometimes take over the human body, and their energy is so bizarre. It's like, it's just absolutely amazing. I'm like, are you kidding me? My experience has been, it scares some people. I've had some friends might be present with some, I'll call them walk-ins, because they just take over the body. Again, I still feel that that's a soul agreement with the person that leaves the body, but their energy is really very almost humanistic. And if you're not used to it, it can actually frighten you. But it's just another form of energy, because the ETs are just another form of energy, and they bring that essence with them into that body. That's why some people get afraid of it, because it's not normal. And anytime we get stuck with something that's not familiar or normal for us, it could create some form of fear. So we all take a deep breath there and move on from there point.
Well, it seems to me that you would have to be a very evolved soul to do something like that. You wouldn't just be a soul that's come in and lived a few lifetimes. This would be a highly evolved soul, in my opinion, to be able to do something like that.
Absolutely. I think it's very important. Like Brian here, my buddy, Grandpa, that's what he has to be, Grandpa. He has been here many, many times. So people like him are willing to jump into, let's say, a troubled situation, because as you mentioned, I think you covered the introduction very well to kind of describe what a walk-in entails, because the person has usually been through a very traumatic situation that very upsetting, could even like a near-death experience. So you can imagine the soul stepping in is having to make through all those adjustments. And that sometimes is very difficult, again, back to learning how to be human, because everybody has learned how to be human after you start your journey. So think of it, you come in cold turkey. How can you be adjusting to a human body when you haven't been in one for many lifetimes? You could
that's got to be quite an adjustment.
It is. And so you can only imagine what it can affect you. And imagine, let's be a little humorous, Brian jumping into a woman's body. Now, he would have adjustment like heck on that one, right? Have some fun with that
That's
one.
a toughie.
You would have no choice in that matter.
Brian would really have to say, I've got to shape up here, girls. So I think there's a little humor, because, again, that's what it would entail. If he agreed to take over a feminine body, he definitely would have some major adjustments to make. And to think of it, how do I get dressed, even symbolically?
Very much like that Freaky Friday movie for Disney, where they switch the bodies, and that's been done over and over. But kind of interesting. Sophia, I know that you are a bit skeptical on this stuff, and for the people that are out there that are skeptical, it's good that you're here. And so I'm wondering what your take on something like this is.
I would say it's not part of my truth, at least not to my knowledge, but I'm open to learn. I've been wrong before. It just isn't something that I've experienced firsthand. Um, I don't know. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'd have to study it more. But I think maybe this is a mirror in the face for me to look into other things because I tend to study the runes almost
Mm-hmm.
almost
So
obsessively. So
yeah,
I
so
haven't
you're not
branched out
closed
much.
off to it, but you're just kind of like, yeah, show me the money kind of thing.
I'm of the persuasion where spirit calls, spirit equips. I've seen some very interesting things to where one of my friends that really wasn't very spiritual were sitting there unpacking a skid, right? And I said something and they replied with something that was totally out of their character. And I was like, "You said what?" And they're like, "I didn't say anything." That's I don't know if that would be a spontaneous, like step in to where spirit uses that person to convey a message. I've seen that, but like total personality changes, I haven't experienced it yet. So, I don't
Hmm.
know.
How about you, Dalibor? What's your understanding of walk-ins and souls
Well,
exchanging?
well, similar to Sophia, I've also personally never experienced anything of this nature, but I've read a lot about it because I take the works of Bretislav Kafka, a Czechoslovakian magician, that I'm sure you're
Mhm.
familiar with. I take his works kind of seriously, and his take on it is that a walk-in or switching of the soul can only happen if you're unconscious. Now, unlike what you said previously, that this could happen during sleep, it cannot happen during sleep because during sleep you are not unconscious. You can still wake up, you can still hear things, you can still think, you can still process sensory inputs. Now,
Mhm.
the reason why it happens more, why it started happening more often in the 70s and 80s, my theory is that people started using hard drugs more. And these will bring you into a state of true unconsciousness where the brain actually becomes anesthetized or unconscious. Or this could also happen during a near death experience, but it doesn't happen during normal sleep. So, if you don't want this happening to you, I would suggest avoiding things like heavy
Don't have
drinking,
a near
hard
death
drugs.
experience.
Yeah, don't have a near death experience. Yeah,
Do
then
you
it's
know
not going to
anyone
happen
that's
to you.
ever do you know anyone that's ever experienced something like this?
Well, not offhand, not offhand, but
Hmm.
I've heard of incidents where people have manifested unusual abilities where they grew up in the United States, and all of a sudden, from one day to the next, they're like pow, and they're speaking like 8 different fluent foreign languages. But these are usually people that suffer from multiple personality disorders or schizophrenia, and these are truly anomalous cognition experiences where scientists have actually documented that this person is speaking like 14th century Italian or something, where in his normal life he would never have come across this language, much less learned it fluently. So it is an obscure topic, but I think because people have been having these experiences more and more since the 70s, that's why you're having movies that deal
Yep.
with this theme, like The Exorcist, that was in the 70s. And then, going forward to like Freaky Friday, movies like that.
To me, possession is
Yes.
different from
Yeah.
a walk-in.
Yes. Different.
That's a
Yeah.
completely different
Well,
scenario
see,
and situation.
it is related, I think, because let's say you go unconscious because you've been drinking too much. Well, in that case, you could get a walk-in or an evil spirit or a lesser spirit or somebody who just wants to exploit you, who was an alcoholic in a previous life and wants to experience that alcoholism in the flesh. So he'll take over your body just to get that experience. And maybe, if you're doing this on a regular basis, he might stay for longer than you plan on. Or,
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's
so
just more of a negative connotation there. I'm
yeah,
kind of more on the positive end of things, just because that's where I like to be. I want to be on the positive side, not the negative so much. But I understand and I hear where you're coming from. Teresa, go ahead. You have a lot to say.
That's all right. No, that's okay.
Mhm.
I think the distinction, Dalibor, for me anyway, and I will tell you about some experiences when we get around to it, but when Lori calls on me. But the distinction between a possession and a mutually agreed upon, negotiated promise with another soul is that one is done willingly, purposefully, for a reason, specific reason. The other is done against your will. It's an
Mhm.
invasion of your privacy, invasion of your will, and it's a corruption, a potential corruption of your soul. So those are the two differences. And so when we use the terminology walk-ins, it's been flipped, inverted over the past several decades because of Hollywood, because of television and film, calling walk-ins possessions and
yeah,
using them
sure, but
interchangeably, like people
in,
use the word spirit and soul interchangeably.
Mhm.
sure,
Mhm.
but in practicality, how do you distinguish between the two?
You distinguish between the two because you know that you have made an agreement. You're taking on that life, and you're remembering as you go along. The walk-ins do eventually get that
Yes,
You would have
memory,
the understanding,
and so
yes.
they have the understanding that they're there to save someone or help someone or to help humanity or serve a higher purpose,
Mhm.
whereas the ones that are being possessed are being led into things that they don't want to do. They cut themselves. There's all kinds of behavior that
sure,
they
sure,
have, and
but
they know that there's something wrong inside of them.
sure, but there's a fine line between it. And I would put that analogy as, let's say, a homeless person versus a non-homeless person. When you see like a discarnate spirit, you take pity on it and you want to give it a home temporarily. You know, let's say you're a charitable person, but you're an alcoholic. So, and you meet this person on the astral plane, the spirit, and he wants to have your experience for a while because he wants to experience that alcoholism again, for old time's sake. And so you give it a home willingly, and then, you know, either by force of inertia or something else at play, that person just stays and cohabits the same body with you. And that's why you see like a lot of violent behavior among alcoholics and drug addicts, because like a lot of these spirits could have bad intentions. So that's it's a difficult distinction to make. Is it a just a bad human spirit or is it a demon? And
Because
if so,
that's
what
the
is the
human's
difference?
way of going, it's black, it's white. There's no
Yeah.
in between. What I've learned through spirit is it is way more simpler than you're making things out to be. And it's not always a negative situation. There are agreements before you come into this body. There's soul sharing, there's body sharing, there's all kinds of different ways that this happens. We do have a question. Andreas, is it possible to let our role models, those who may be our guides or masters or enlightened beings, in our souls and become even one with them? Teresa, what do you have to say to that?
I think for periods of time that is exactly what happens. Um, I do know that my knowing and my experiences have been an infusion of angelic energy from the very beginning of my life as a soul. I've been partly infused with higher versions of selves from higher hierarchies and realms. And they make up part of your composition, part of your blueprint of your soul. So your soul is infused with that energy. And I think that there are times when you can combine your thought with a very strong and deep connection with not only higher versions of yourself and angelic hierarchies or whoever you're connecting with and feel right about. It's up to you.
Mhm.
But I do believe that the masters, and I have felt the presence of the Christos spirit that was in Jesus of Nazareth deep within my own heart. So, and I have communication. And there are periods of time, usually it's high stress or trauma, like an accident or something that's going on where I need that extra strength or I need that extra mental capacity and resources, where for a very brief period, our frequencies interchange and that entity walks with me and gives me what I need until that event is over with. Whether or not you can do it on a long-term basis, I wouldn't know. That's not been my experience.
Hmm. Grandpa Brian, what's your understanding of all this? You have any insight on this?
I think most of the exchanges are actually done between young souls and old souls, where young souls really haven't had experiences in
Mm,
certain things and they actually can't handle it at that point in time,
mm,
where an
good.
older soul comes in and helps them along and takes over to finish their mission. And then maybe a couple lifetimes down the road, that person that bailed on that soul actually learn from the other soul how to deal with that, and the same situation comes up again and they are able to deal with it at that point in time instead of having to leave the body.
Yeah.
But then there's other times where I know, like Jim, he'll let a spirit come in, take over his body for a few to say what they have to say, and then boom, they're gone. So yeah, there's different types. Like I
Mm,
said, Jim willingly lets them come in, but it's only for a short period of time, say what they have to say, and then
yeah, and
boom.
that's more
So
like channeling. Mm-hmm.
yeah, channeling, but still you're allowing them to take over,
Sure.
say what they
Yeah.
have to say, the
Use your
agreement with
body as
them.
the vessel. Yep.
Exactly. So there's many
Mm-hmm.
different types of exchanges, and
Yeah.
I do believe.
Right, good way to look at it.
Convoluted, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah.
one thing I've learned is anything, and I mean anything, is possible. And when you kind of have that understanding and you've witnessed and experienced things that you never thought possible, kind of makes you a believer real quick.
Yes, it does.
At least in my mind.
Mhm.
I can't speak for anyone else but myself. Yeah. Sophia, go ahead. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to speak to what Grandpa Brian and Andreas said. You know, is
Mm-hmm.
it possible to let our role models and our guides and masters and light beings? Yeah, and coming from someone who is also a trance
Mm-hmm.
medium,
Mm-hmm.
it that's part of my reality. That's part of my truth. I've experienced that. I can speak to that. The other part of it is, I mean, I could see, like
But that's
Bellator was
temporary, right?
saying, of course, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
especially certain kinds of trance. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I could see like a near death experience, but somebody that's had near death experiences, I mean, I would have to ask one of my close friends if they noticed a change or something. But for me, my struggle is with the coursework that I've taken that I hold as true as far as spiritual anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
But like we've said, you know, all we have to do is kind of dare spirit, and interesting things happen. They're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
add that to your playbook, will you?
Yeah.
So
That's
I
a good way
just
to
kind of perhaps we'll see.
mental note. Ugh, journal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Some of the things that it just makes me understand that there's just so much more to all of this, that we're just simply having a human experience and we're all doing the best we can. That's why we're here. And there's no manual for it. Otherwise, it would be like knowing the answers to the test, and we can't do that. So we
Right.
got to get through it. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, the analogy here would be, channeling would be just like letting a visitor into one room of your house.
Mhm.
Whereas, an involuntary walk-in is not under your control, where this person takes over your house and ransacks it.
Mhm. Although I believe that that is possible and that it does happen. Yes, absolutely. I don't deny that. But
Yeah.
and that exists because there's always the contrast between the two. But I personally know someone that has experienced this on that level, and I have no reason to disbelieve in any way that it's not true. And this is one of the reasons we're doing the show and just kind of bringing people's
But
attention to it, because it's
yeah,
just so extraordinary.
But
Yeah.
getting into the minutia of what I was talking about before, I was mentioning alcohol, and alcohol is also called spirit. Now, why is
Mm-hmm.
it called spirit? You know,
Tell more.
if you're actually not channeling, but allowing a walk-in of a spirit
Mm-hmm.
of ethanol, C2H5OH, to take over your brain, to take over your soul and or your spirit temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Grandpa Brian, you've got a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, I want to pose this question. So when that exchange happens, does the spirit and new soul coming in take on the energy that is in the body and the frequency of the body, or does the body change with the frequency of the spirit and soul that is coming in?
That's a very interesting point.
Anybody have a comment on that?
Well,
How
I
about you,
think
Teresa?
Well, I was at the same time he was talking, looking at what Lucky was saying.
I think Jim has something to say
Yeah,
Go
about
ahead,
go ahead.
Jim.
that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's okay. Well, again, since we're sharing, it's like sharing a space together, like the house. When two people move in together and they say, well, we have to share this space, to some degree, there's always a bit of, even if one person leaves the house, the other person's personality still remains in the house to some degree. Like, how is it
Mhm.
decorated? How is it put together? So there's still some aftermath energy left from the departed spirit or soul, whatever you want to call it. It's funny you would call them departed because they're not in the
Mhm.
body anymore, but
Yeah.
there's still a part of their energy that will remain in that body. It's just the way it works. Unless you made a complete clearing before it actually transpires, obviously you're still going to have some residue of that other
Well,
person's energy in your space, in that body.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
one of
Makes
the things that
sense.
keeps coming to me is about our shattered souls. You've heard the expression of a person being completely shattered or broken.
Mhm.
Now, can
Mhm.
you imagine a spirit or a person that has had a major, complete breakdown of their physical body, completely collapsing, and somebody stepping in and taking over? The condition of that
Yes.
body is absolutely in very bad
Yeah.
shape because they're
Mhm.
scattered, they're broken. Think if you took a glass, you know, glass and throw it on the floor, on a cement floor, how many pieces is it going to be? In hundreds, maybe
Mhm.
thousands. So you can imagine what's left of a person to take that part of the person back into making them a living human being that's decent is a big project. So you can only imagine what they have to go through to get.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's like, are you
Which would
kidding
take
me?
an advanced soul to actually do that. Yeah.
So you can
Well, I
So
only
they
think
would
that's.
have.
imagine
I think.
what a nightmare the
Yeah.
Jim,
person
I
that's
think.
taken over that body has
Yeah.
got to go through to get to back to
Mhm.
being,
Absolutely.
say, a decent, balanced human being again. So somebody that would want to take over that is asking for one big heck of an experience, literally. I
And
mean,
it's
Yeah.
complex, Jim, and I think you just described something that I that I think is, I'm pretty sure, happened with me. And when Lori brought this up, we were working on 3 different show formats at the same time, trying to figure out which ones we were going to do and in what order. And we were talking about um, the Akashic Records. We were talking about this subject and another one that's coming up. And we were talking about timelines overlapping, multiple dimensions, and experiencing. Uh, Sometimes you feel like you're just not yourself. Sometimes you feel like you're not meant to really be here in this body. And as we were talking, Lori sends me this video of this guy who who had a near death traumatic experience, but it wasn't a near death because he didn't see the white light, and there wasn't any choices about crossing over. But he was very aware of what was going on with his body during this accident, and he felt the other soul walk in, and he saw 2 versions of himself, his soul self.
right.
And when he explained all that on this video, it triggered me because I've had a couple of life-threatening, and I did have a near-death experience not so long ago in my 50s, and I know the difference. And now that I know that experience and have seen him and a couple of other people talking, and they share what their experience is like, I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like me at age 13. And so I told Lori this story. And what we all have in common is We're not unconscious at all. But we go through this experience where everything slows down and goes into slow motion. So I was playing flag football in the girls' flag football physical education class in middle school, what you all call middle school, we called junior high. And I dove for some girl's flag, and when I did, she took all of her body force, which she shouldn't have done, and pushed my neck and head sideways as she spun, and I hit the ground and snapped my neck, and a bone came out of my neck. And so it flipped me upside down, slammed me into the ground, and I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. But I was awake. I wasn't unconscious. But everything slowed down like it was in slow motion. And I could see their lips move, but there was no sound for the longest time. And that happened to these other people too. We don't have an audible. We don't know what people are saying, but we know they're running around and their lips are moving, but we don't understand. We don't experience any pain either. So I wasn't in pain. I didn't even know what happened, and I couldn't understand why everybody was running around, but I also couldn't understand why I couldn't move. And as I'm lying there, I'm like delighted in a way. I'm like, I feel myself coming out of my body, and I'm looking over it just like a near-death experience, like I had with that accident when I was in my 50s. And I can look down and see everything that's going on around me in my body. But at the same time, I'm in my body. So I'm in two places. I'm in my body. And I'm like, what the hell? I see me floating over me, and then I'm looking down at me. There's two of me. And I'm fully conscious because they're asking me questions. Apparently, I'm trying to answer them, but I don't feel like I'm answering them because I'm too involved in what I'm seeing. And so eventually I figured out that, oh, gee, I don't have to stay. You're going to stay? I can get the hell out of here, because I was going through and had been through for 13 years of my life some really not so great things that I don't want to elaborate on, but they were quite traumatic for me. And so I couldn't deal with any of that anymore. And I was having relationship problems, identity problems, seizures, all kinds of other types of things, bad relationships with my family. Didn't feel like I belonged to that family. I had a miserable life. And here was an opportunity to skedaddle. And the other soul is looking up at me going, what the hell? How did I get here? Oh, I know what I need to do. And anyway, it went on for what seemed like several minutes. And I remember the ambulance ride, and I remember not knowing who my parents came in. I'm like, who are you people? My friends were trying to talk to me. I'm like, who are these people? They're trying to talk to me. So I disassociated for a week or two. I had to see a psychiatrist. The new soul, me, who's now in this body, had to see a psychiatrist. And they told my family I was disassociating because maybe I had too much trauma and this, that, and the other. I didn't know what was going on until recently. I figured it out because I went into the Akashic Records and I checked. And I checked with my guides. And so the soul that is occupying this body right now didn't start from birth and didn't go through what the other soul went through for those first 13 years of her life as Teresa. And it also explains every single one of these people has the same background that I have in terms of wanting to come into this life to do something purposeful and meaningful that involves healing. And I've had so many past lives as a healer. I have experience with healing, right, Lori?
Absolutely.
And so I came in multiple incarnations, either as a shaman or a temple priestess. I've been a medical healer. I've been a nurse. And in this life, I wanted to be an EMT, and I got some EMT training. I got Red Cross CPR first aid training. I went into the Auxiliary Coast Guard and got some experience and did some work with them. I wanted to be in the Coast Guard, and I wanted to be in professions that helped other people. It's how I ended up with American Red Cross. It's how I ended up with um, Easter seals, and so on. So my whole life has been about healing, some type of healing work, whether it be mental health or physical. And so this is the you'll find this when you go to interview these people who have the understanding that they're walk-ins. And so I put two and two together and figured it out. And I figured out that's why I was able to get through the kind of thing I got through for those first 13 years. That's why Spirit's been with me. That's why Great Mother came to me at such a young age as an apparition in a dark enclosed room, and she's never left me. That guide has always been with me. And so I'm given all this help to do all these things. And even though I have trials and tribulations and post-traumatic, I remember what that other soul went through. I have the
Well,
emotions and the feelings of what that other soul experienced. And it wasn't easy.
well, let's just postulate that what if what you saw wasn't your soul, but a copy of your soul that got cut and pasted, and then, the pasted copy got fixed, edited, and then pasted back, just
What?
like you would a text.
Okay,
What if it was repaired, on
that's
in a
interesting.
different dimension?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Because
I,
that would also explain this cutting and pasting of souls, or copying and pasting, could explain why a lot of people have been possessed by the same soul. But it could be not the soul itself, but a copy of the soul.
Yeah, I don't know. All I
Or it
know,
could
the
just be
only,
exactly what she told you. And I'm
yeah, that's
actually very
my,
proud of
Hmm.
you that you expressed that and that you told other people, because I wasn't expecting that tonight. But that's good
well,
because
it's
you've
where I
got
am
this.
with it. And it's where I am with it. And I'm being honest about where I am with it. But am I 100% convinced? No, but I feel its truth. And I've consulted my guides. I went into the Akashic Records and they confirmed it for me. That
Yeah.
in this particular lifetime, I walked in. And I may have also done it in a different epoch a long time ago. And that one I'm a little bit less sure about because I don't have the memories. I
Mhm.
have the memories, and I match up with everybody that fits this profile. It seems I feel the truth in it, but
Mhm.
it has what it enabled me to do is it enabled me to set free the other soul that was ready to collapse because there were suicidal attempts.
Hmm.
Okay,
Mhm.
that soul wanted out, wanted to check out, and so it was that bad. And when I went through as a adult later on in life, and I got that low again, where I felt the need to check out, I was able to stop myself in a completely freaking different way. Because after that experience, it's when I started studying multiple religions and I was started seeking spiritual comfort. After
Mhm.
that football injury, I started experiencing psychic phenomena. That's another sign. I didn't start like Sophia from the very beginning, but after that, in my later teens and early 20s, I started having visions. I started having premonitions. I did have, when I was younger, that thing about Dr. Sam and seeing death and knowing he was going to die. So all these things started happening to me that the other me never experienced. Never had any psychic experiences, never had any connection with spirit whatsoever. But I did. At age 14, it all started after that accident. After my neck was repaired and I recovered, I started experiencing things. I didn't understand what they were. And I was seen by psychiatrists who said, oh, she's disassociating, or oh, she's talking to others. She might have schizophrenia, or she might even be multiple. I was tested and I passed all those tests with flying colors. You know, my parents aren't stupid. They got multiple input into that. So I had more than one evaluation. And so I know I wasn't any of those things. But the religious community wanted to label me like that. They wanted to exorcise demons. She's possessed. They tried to do so many things to me and it's like, are you back off? I'm fine. But I ended up growing from that and learning from it. But I'm telling you, it's been a lifelong process. But I'm going to let that go. But I wanted to share it with you so that you would understand that what walk-ins are saying, we all have these similar traits. These are what we experience. And we're not unconscious, we're conscious. And we're not asleep, we're awake. We're just not sure of who we are. And it's not something that you don't take those memories from the other soul. It's not like a data dump. And then overnight, you know everything that the other soul went through. It's an unveiling, just like your current life is now. An unveiling.
Makes some sense. It would take time to
Well,
So
in
human
which
mind
case,
can't take it all.
assimilate. Yeah, assimilate that energy.
in which case, that would answer the question that was posited before. Like, would you know if you're a walk-in? I would say, based on what you just said,
Eventually.
definitely yes. Definitely yes.
When the
You'd have
universe
to.
needs to reveal it to you, when you need it to be revealed. Just
Mm-hmm.
like it's been revealed to me about these other lives, I've learned something from every one of those revelations about those other lives that have in turn strengthened me or enabled me to clear up karma. They've made me stronger, haven't they, Lori?
Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
So, and now coming to this understanding, and it all got triggered. Let me tell you, spirit works in really freaky ways, okay? There's so much going on in a 1 week period. I'm going to Camp Chesterfield, and I'm having some experiences there that I never thought were possible, like that portrait. That's next week's show. We'll talk about that. And then Lori's getting these downloads about this show, and then I'm getting memories from a past life, and I'm doing research, and it all comes together in the perfect storm. It's that perfect storm of knowing. And you ever have one of those moments when you're like, I freaking get it.
Mhm.
Oh, my mind is freaking blown, but I understand.
Wow moment.
That's what
Yeah.
that's what I got from this. And it was like, it made total freaking sense to me. Can I prove it? No, of course not. Can I prove it scientifically? No, of course not. But it comes down to what you think and what you believe and what you
Does
feel
it
is right.
resonate with you? Does it feel like truth?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need proof. I
You're
mean,
the only one that needs to know. Yeah, you're the one that dictates how that works. But yeah.
I mean, it's just, and people go, well, I just can't believe her. Why not? If you believe that a spirit artist can put their hand on the edge of a canvas and a painting can appear before your eyes, why can't you believe something like this? Or if you can believe, I mean, there's so many different things that can happen on a psychic, spiritual level. It might not be your experience right now.
Right.
You may have never met anybody that had that experience.
Well, now you have.
You know, but there's several of them out there being interviewed, more than you think.
And getting back to like,
but I never
saw
them.
I've discovered that I'm definitely not a walk-in because, the more meditation I've done, the more I've gone back into the Akashic records, I'm starting to remember bits and pieces from when I was like 3 months old.
Yeah.
Things that
I came in the traditional way, the fetus way. Yes. From beginning
definitely.
to end, I'm solid.
I must have been an old soul because I started speaking at the age of 6 months, which is kind of rare, and I haven't shut up since. Yeah.
That's incredible, Dalibor. That is. So, were you walking sooner than most as well?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm not sure about the walking because I don't think I even asked about that. But my mom told me that, oh my God, you started speaking when you were 6 months old, and
I bet you could find your own name too, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's like Trina had a mind-blowing event occur when she went back in her timeline and met a healthier version of herself.
Yes.
So there's all kinds of psychic phenomena that's going on with it on the soul level, and I think a lot of it has been mislabeled, misdiagnosed. And I do want to tell you, there was a young man in the Pentecostal church. He was young, had a beautiful young wife. He was only about 28 or 29. He was having a lot of seizures, but the doctors were having a hard time trying to figure out what it was. He had separated from the Pentecostal church. He had awakened to some of the things about that kind of organized religion. And his family, though, was still very active in it. And so they got all the church elders together and they were working on him, trying to get him to come back to the fold. And
Yeah.
he kept resisting it. He even moved out of the state to another state with his new wife. They had a great life, but he was having repetitive seizures, and they kept saying it's Satan attacking his spirit because he's no longer one of us. He no
Sure.
longer believes in Jesus Christ as his salvation.
Mhm.
So every chance they got, they tried to lay hands on him or get him to come into the church or do something to him physically. And what they did was phone call him, his own family. He just got harassed constantly by his own family.
Mhm.
The day that one morning, his wife found him on the floor next to the bed. He had gotten up out of bed, took a step, apparently went forward, hit his head on the coffee table, crashed to the floor. He had a brain aneurysm, and
Holy shit.
they had never discovered it.
Mhm.
But they were playing with his mind, making him think he might be possessed. They were working with her, making her think that he might have multiple personality disorder. Because at times he didn't feel like himself. He was having these incredible experiences. That's why I started the opening of the show the way I did. He's just one example of many. There was another who ended up getting divorced. His wife divorced him because she was convinced by the church that he was possessed, and she wanted to get herself and the kids away from him.
And
So
that's
she
just fear
and
instead
then he
of
lost his. It was a domino effect. He lost his job.
yeah.
Then he had a reputation in the church of being someone who was resistant to the Christ healing. And this went on and on and on. And I saw it happen many, many times, how people's lives have been ruined by these assumptions because people don't understand and they're not open to accepting the possibility. But there's something going on a deeper spiritual level, on a soul level.
Yeah.
And Lori understands these soul agreements better than anybody I know. In fact, I've watched Abraham Hicks, I've watched Colette Baron Reed, I've watched Suzanne Gleisman. Lori can explain these agreements better than anybody I've heard on in the public. But
Well,
she
see,
has a
that's the
deep
problem.
understanding of it.
That's the problem with a lot of these organized religions. They have this one size fits all solution for everything. And it's usually, Satan. And it's just like one of my mom's friends. She passed away a couple of years ago and she was hyper religious. And, if you asked her what the source of all problems was, it was Satan and the communists, always. And every time she said that, I thought, wow, that would be a great name for a heavy metal band, wouldn't it? Satan and the. So, if she stubbed her toe,
Satan
it
and his
was
peeps, right?
Satan and the communists did it.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, how simplistic.
You know,
And, you know,
Caroline had an interesting experience, and I thought we'd share this. Some years ago, I was driving back home from work, and for some maybe 3 to 4 seconds, it felt like I was engaging light speed and kind of felt stretched like spaghetti, the length of half planet. Huh. I never
Yeah.
could explain what it was. Yeah. It's just like reality just bent and moved and twisted and that's
parallel reality.
yeah. And you were on the freeway when that happens. Thank goodness you didn't have an accident or run into anybody or anybody run into you.
Where's
That's an
Scotty?
amazing experience.
Scotty's saying here, advanced souls born knowing thyself have no need to be speaking on YouTube. Maybe they're just trying to help increase awareness like I am tonight. Maybe they hope that in sharing their stories, we can all kind of work together to understand these things and
Because
try to
obviously
figure out.
they're happening and people are experiencing them. So
And some people are
how do
totally
you
freaking
change
mind blown.
attitudes? You share. That's exactly right.
Right.
And I believe that's where he's coming from on that too.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Very interesting.
Well, it was a Jim, when you've done past life regressions with people. Have you ever come across anyone who has had an overlap in their human linear timeline where they've experienced a lifetime very close to or almost overlapping another timeline.
Absolutely. There's a lot of corresponding experiences from their past life, including the year. Like, for instance, if you had an experience in the past life that you had at 10, you'll have it again at 10 in this lifetime. Almost exactly the same experience. Why? Because
Yeah.
you're there to either fix, help, repair, heal, or maybe you need the lesson learned again or something. There's many multiple ways to look at it. But your past lives, again, I like what Delbert said about remembering everything about your son 6 months old. That's very unusual. I remember up anything for prior to 2. I was 2, and I can remember pretty much all my highlights. So I know this is the full space. I've not shared my space, but this has been me the whole time. Remember everything that much. A lot of people say, how can you remember it? I don't know how I can remember it. I just remember it. There's a lot of weird stuff that was simple stuff. It doesn't complicate it. I can still remember even going to eat at a restaurant years ago in a foreign state. Like I was traveling on a trip somewhere. I can still remember the restaurant. Why? I can't answer that question. I can even describe what we. I don't remember what I ate, but I can tell you what the restaurant looked like. How could you remember a freaking restaurant one time after many years later?
Yeah,
I can't answer that
so
question.
young. Yeah.
Can't answer that question. I just know I remember it. But the spirit, I think, my opinion, the spirit can be not remember the exchange. They could just say they were not supposed to remember because that could be traumatic in itself. So again, just like coming in, starting your life, like what did I do in my past life? Sometimes I don't remember what happened in the past life, so because that could screw up what I want to learn in this lifetime. It's like starting with a clean slate. So it all depends, because sometimes you come in just to learn something or heal something from the past, and other times you come in with like a clean slate to start a new chapter of your spiritual evolution. Because that's what we're doing, is spiritually evolving constantly every time we come back. At least we're working on that, I should say, because sometimes you always make progress because it's bigger challenge than you think it is, because it's life. Just think life is actually against us as a spiritual evolution being. So you can imagine the odds of you evolving in one lifetime to be from, let's say, I call ground zero, to be completely evolved spiritually. It's near impossible. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's near, because the world is literally against us in humanistic experiences. Because it pulls from you, it drains you, it drains your energy.
Yes, definitely.
So we have to be ready to face it. That's why we're here to learn, evolve, and be.
In many ways, to me, the human experience is the death state, and being in spirit is really where you're really living.
That's another way to look at it.
Kind of the flip side.
It's a way to look at it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
I like how Brian opened this up with his understanding, because I'm right in there with you, Brian. It's amazing the kind of support we get. If only we can open up to spirit and understand that support and see it as something loving and nurturing, as opposed to something diabolical or manipulative, as so many people see. And there are those out there. You just have to use a lot of discernment. But I think it's incredible that another soul can step in to help out. That's teamwork.
Yeah, like what Scotty Boy said. Yes, I agree, Teresa. Scotty Boy says, I feel there are many advanced souls behind the everyday life holding this place together. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
some people call them angels that step in like at critical times, where some guy pulls a lady out of a car crash, and then they're looking for him, and there's nobody around. People like that.
Oh, sure. We're coming to the end of the hour, Teresa, and I thought maybe if you wanted to set up the spirit message that I received. Today, and I thought we could close. You and I had discussed closing out the show with this information. Which is quite interesting.
I think good idea.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead, Laura. You.
It's all good. So earlier today, I got a spirit message, and it was very much in line with what was going on here, and it has to do with soul agreements, contracts, and this is from my guide, my primary guide, And I basically took a lot of notes and jotted it all down and put it into a video and thought I would play this to share with you. The information is quite amazing in my mind, and I think it will help a lot of people understand soul agreements, soul promises, soul contracts, whatever you want to call it. It's a little over 4 minutes, but we'll close this out. So I want to thank Jim for being here tonight. Grandpa Brian, thank you so much for being here as well.
Thanks, guys.
We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having us.
Always our pleasure. Always. Dalibor Suki, I love how you
Pleasure
always
to be
take
here.
that opposite opinionated side. I dig it. I love it. Sophia, it's so good to see you, and we've missed you the last few weeks. Teresa, thank you so much for sharing your story. Go ahead.
Next week.
Yes.
Since we're closing out, let me make this announcement now.
Sure.
Okay, so you all know Brian and I went to, and Lori was supposed to come too. She was there with us anyway in spirit the whole time. So we went to Camp Chesterfield, and we went to All My Relations Superstore, and we hooked up with Reb Charles again at Camp Chesterfield, and we met Meg Wolfsifer. And Meg is in training to be a minister. She's a teacher and a spirit artist, spiritist artist and medium. And Brian and I took the tour of the Heft Museum to see all the different spirit art. So we're doing a show next week on spirit art. I don't want to give away any secrets, but we're bringing Meg on, so we have yet another person to meet in the community from Camp Chesterfield. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
She's going to tell us about her art, and we have some of Lori's to show, because Lori's part of this, and there are different types of art forms, and we're going to talk about how spirit works through mediumship and artists, including architectures. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. And special thanks to you, Jim and Heather, for all the wonderful hospitality you showed to me, and well, of course, Brian. You have to show him the hospitality. He'd be hopping on your back anyway. These guys are like father son. I'm telling you,
I love it.
They really are. And that whole energy of that place, Jim, just pops. Every single person that works there.
Very strong. For people that are not familiar with energy, it almost frightens them out of the store because it's so intense.
It is so intense.
I believe it.
The minute you walk in, you just go. I mean, you open the doors, you take 3 steps. You take 3 steps forward, and you're looking down this long part of the, and you go. You know, you just feel it, you just suck it in, and the whole time you're there, you don't want to leave. And all the crystals are speaking to you, and all the gemstones and crystals are speaking to you, and it's just a fantastic place. Thank you.
It's wonderful.
For lunch,
wonderful.
Thank you for showing us a great time, and you thank Heather for me for spending so much time with me too, because I was like a kid loose in a candy store, because Brian gave me this huge big gift certificate for my birthday, and because I had never experienced anything like that, and I went nuts. But it was great, and Jim came through with spirit message from Brian Barnett. Came in the restaurant. We were sitting in the restaurant having lunch, and Brian Barnett came through, and a couple of other spirits that Brian Richards might know came through, and we felt the truth of the messages, and it was just an incredible experience, because Jim's sitting there, and all of a sudden he's rubbing his head. I'm like, is he all right? You know, and Heather gives me a little winky poo, and
I'm not all right.
Oh, here he goes.
Put your tray table up, kids.
Yeah.
So, it's very special time, very special afternoon, and folks, if you get a chance to get there, go both places, Camp Chesterfield and All My Relations. Yeah. So anyway, thank you, and thank you, Sophia, for a nice Mexican lunch. Telling the waiter to double spike my drink.
What? I wouldn't do that.
Oh, come on.
An innocent bystander.
I was gone all afternoon
she
because
had
of
the
you.
bottle with her.
You're not so innocent.
Double shots in their
I was
daiquiris.
gone the whole afternoon because of that.
Oopsie.
For the
I
evening.
love it. I love
My
it.
bad.
That was funny. I'm sitting there trying to play a card game with Charles and Meg and Meg's
Oh.
friend, and I'm sitting there trying to. And
Flushing around.
yeah, thank. Never
That's
have a
awesome.
margarita with Sophia if she knows the
Ah.
restaurant.
What? No.
I love that.
All right, you guys.
Okay,
All right.
everybody,
Thank you.
watch the video. It's awesome. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend, and peace and love to all of you.
All right,
Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Contracts, soul agreements, or soul promises. Why would we choose these difficult relationships? The very basis of soul contract is karma. Karma teaches us the lesson via the soul contracts. The first type, spiritual contract, is the learner. The other is the teacher. The second type is you are the teacher and the opposite person is the learner. This is to get you into a relationship for experiences, and this invokes the emotions and triggers the lesson. This is so the soul can experience the lessons and learns from the relationship. Experiencing in the body gives the soul the totality of the lesson. We exist in two different dimensions. One is on the soul level and the other the physical. Contracts are promises we make before incarnating. When we enter into a relationship, it triggers our agreements, and then the lessons begin. We get triggered with emotions and experiences. The third type is, I am the learner and the teacher, and experience both sides of the lesson. You will trigger the other person, and they will trigger you. These are the most difficult because you are exchanging lessons for each other. These are highly karmic relationships because you are both playing the same roles. These are the most difficult relationships, but highly effective. Most of the time, we choose the third kind to get the most out of the time spent in physical form. What's important has to have a karmic basis. Finding balance from your perspective is the key. The other person's contract is not your focus. In the end, your soul is only concerned about how many lessons you've learned and not what the other person is doing. You always have to come back to yourself. See what it is your lesson, what it is you are not learning. When you shift your focus onto yourself, things will always get easier for you, no matter what the other person is experiencing. You are here to learn about yourself. Others are here to help you achieve this. Focusing on others' lessons takes you away from your own, so it's important to understand you are not responsible for what others think or feel. It truly is about the self first and foremost. Where are our lessons? The sooner you learn your lessons, you will not become triggered anymore. Hence, you've learned your valuable lessons. Then you become balanced. Then in the future, you learn not to become triggered. And this is where you learn balance. The hurt, blame, anger is taken out, and you take back your power. If you can find gratitude for what you've learned in the relationship, then you have grown from it. Situations are not happening to you, they are happening for you. If you can look at your situation from a soul level and not the human ego, you will gain balance without being triggered by the other person. When you take control of your emotions, you realize you cannot be triggered by negative emotions. How do we know when we've learned the lesson? When you no longer allow anyone to trigger your emotions and have gained control over them. This is self-mastery, and hence You have learned the lesson. You are perfect, whole and complete, one with the universal consciousness and the all that is. Love always, your team.